Poseidon, the lord of the seas, was one of the most powerful gods of Mount Olympus. His story in the Trojan War is marked by a mix of anger, loyalty, and vengeance, making him an essential yet unpredictable figure in this epic conflict. His involvement with both the Greeks and the Trojans was complex, fueled by decades of resentment. The origin of Poseidon's hatred for Troy dates back to an unpaid debt. In a previous era, he and Apollo were forced by Zeus to serve King Laomedon of Troy. Poseidon built the city's mighty walls, making them nearly impenetrable. Apollo tended to the king's flocks on Mount Ida. However, when their year of service ended, Laomedon refused to pay them for their work, even threatening Poseidon and Apollo with torture. Enraged, Poseidon sent a sea monster to ravage Troy. Only when Hercules killed the creature did the city have peace. But Poseidon's hatred for Troy endured. When the Trojan War began, Poseidon allied with the Greeks, but his aid was not simple. His resentment toward Troy made his involvement intense, sometimes to the detriment of his own allies. He helped the Greeks, but his assistance came at a cost. Sometimes his storms had to be controlled to allow Greek ships to pass, or he would stir the sea to steer the winds in favor of the heroes. He had a special bond with the Greeks, but at the same time, the anger in his heart drove him to intervene in unpredictable ways. During the conflict, Poseidon also felt an internal divide, as his own son, Cygnus, fought on the side of the Trojans. Cygnus was immune to all weapons, an almost invincible warrior. When Achilles killed Cygnus, Poseidon, overwhelmed with grief and rage, transformed his body into a swan, a symbol of his sorrow mixed with anger at the loss of his son. In the early years of the war, Poseidon offered his help when possible. He strengthened the Greek ships against the storms and calmed the seas so that the ships could sail safely. But when Zeus ordered the gods not to interfere directly, Poseidon felt powerless, watching as the Trojans began to gain the upper hand. He grew increasingly frustrated with the situation, feeling that his help was insufficient to change the fate of the Greeks. Then, in a moment of distraction from Zeus, Poseidon seized the opportunity to act. He descended from his underwater palace, and in a golden chariot drawn by horses with golden manes, he advanced toward the battlefield. The sea parted at his passage, as if nature itself bent to his power. Disguised as a Greek prophet, he appeared before the Greek heroes, offering renewed strength to Ajax and Telamon, who were on the verge of retreating. His presence on the battlefield gave the Greeks new courage, and they began to resist the Trojan attacks with greater vigor. When the Trojans attacked the ships, Poseidon did not hesitate to get directly involved and took on a human form and joined the battle among the Greeks, altering the course of the war in their favor. However, Zeus soon noticed his brother's intervention and, furious, threatened Poseidon with his thunderbolt. Zeus, the king of the gods, reminded Poseidon that despite being brothers, he was the stronger one. Poseidon reluctantly withdrew from the battlefield, but not without protesting, claiming that he had as much right as Zeus to decide the fate of the war. Though he partially obeyed, he continued helping the Greeks in more subtle ways. When Achilles faced the river's commander and nearly drowned in its waters, Poseidon intervened once again, calming the river's flow so that the great Greek hero would not be defeated by something as trivial as a river. He knew that if Achilles fell, the fate of the Greeks would be sealed. During the funeral of Patroclus, Poseidon demonstrated once again how well he understood the fate of mortals. He granted speech to Achilles' immortal horses, Xanthos and Balius, allowing them to prophesy the death of Achilles, reinforcing the inevitability of fate, even though he himself was willing to fight against it to help the Greeks. But Poseidon's relationship with both the gods and mortals was a blend of loyalty and vengeance. When Zeus finally allowed the gods to intervene freely, Poseidon returned to the battlefield with renewed fury. He confronted Apollo, his nephew, questioning why he defended the Trojans, the sons of Laomedon, the very man that both gods had served. Apollo, however, refused to fight against his uncle over mere mortals, preferring to maintain a respectful distance. At the end of the war, when Troy finally fell, Poseidon watched with an ironic smile. He had been the architect of the city's mighty walls, but it was human ingenuity that destroyed what he had created. The famous Trojan horse, a clever trick, was the key to the city's downfall. Though the walls of Troy were impregnable, the Trojans opened their gates to the enemy, and thus the city was destroyed. However, Poseidon also witnessed the ruthless acts committed by the Greeks during the sack of the city. When Ajax the Lesser committed a sacrilegious act by violating Cassandra in the temple of Athena, Poseidon did not hesitate to take vengeance. With his boundless rage, he destroyed the rock where Ajax clung, sending him to the depths of the sea as punishment for his arrogance. Finally, Poseidon did not forget his most personal enemy, Odysseus. When Odysseus blinded Polyphemus, Poseidon's son, the god of the sea swore vengeance. For 10 long years, Poseidon pursued Odysseus, sending storms and destroying his ships whenever the hero neared home. Only when Zeus ordered Poseidon to allow Odysseus to return did the sea god finally relent, permitting the hero to reach his homeland, but not without another demonstration of his vengeance. At the end of the war and his vengeance, Poseidon returned to his domain beneath the sea, feeling that he had fulfilled his role. He had helped, but he had also punished. His wrath and power were as deep as the oceans he ruled. During the Trojan War, Poseidon represented the unpredictability of the sea, sometimes an ally, sometimes an enemy, but always a powerful force that shaped the fate of both gods and mortals.